This is another roundtable edition of the Dentons Smart Cities and Connected Communities think tank. Our topic today is AI, and we're thrilled to be hosting with our frequent partner, the Keystone Policy Center, as part of their Key Conversations program. My name's Clint Vince. I chair Denton's energy practice, and together with my teammate Emma Hand, we chair our 1,200 member global energy sector for the US region. Emma and I also co-chair this think tank. And we're going to have an extremely exceptional panel once again. I'm really excited to hear this topic on AI. And before we begin, I'd like to invite Christine Scanlon, the amazing CEO of Keystone, to give us a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Clint. I really appreciate you and certainly this collaboration with Dentons. It's been such an amazing series, and today won't disappoint. I'd like to really acknowledge our panelists. I think this topic is both timely, controversial, and a lot of folks will learn a lot from the people you've gathered here today, Clint. So I really appreciate the partnership and us being a part of this, and look forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much, Christine. And today, since we are dealing with a megatrend topic that many people do not fully understand, we're going to begin the roundtable a little bit differently and start off with a fireside chat with Christian Durossier, who is the head of Visceral. And Visceral is a research and communications automation platform. Christian has worked all over the world, particularly in Southeast Asia, East Africa, and somehow he also managed to tuck in a master's degree at MIT. So this is a broad gauge, cutting edge guy, and I look forward to all of us learning a little bit from him. Christian, as I understand it, Visceral leverages AI, not just for data analytics, but also for direct consumer interaction. Can you explain that a little bit more carefully for us? And then we'll launch into some specific questions about what you do and what's exciting you.
Sure, thank you. At a high level, what we do is a kind of a different approach to research and analytics, which is less built around social listening, data mining, and a lot of the things that we typically think of when we think about analytics. Our platform is oriented around leveraging AI to propose things into the market. So actually push new things into the market and measure the market's response to it. So it's less about looking at historical data to infer about the future and more about just pushing kind of in a scientific and thoughtful way, new concepts, products, ideas into the market, leveraging AI, and then measuring the market's response to that.
And as AI continues to redefine industries, it can be pretty dizzying for executives to know exactly what to focus on. What advice do you have for businesses coming into this field?
Sure. The most general advice that I would give is to experiment a lot. It's hard to translate the headlines from the New York Times or the Atlantic. Every week there's some new headline about, oh, AI outsmarted McKinsey consultants. Look at this study that just happened. It's hard to bridge that gap to actual results in a business without getting your hands dirty. So my biggest piece of advice would be to kind of engage some of these new startups that have new value propositions, and then also a lot of incumbents are integrating AI into their offerings. So again, my advice would be to just experiment a lot yourself.
In terms of choosing their best priorities?
And just trying out new tools. So there's a lot of opportunity merging AI with specialized knowledge, which is almost definitionally locked up inside of organizations and specific teams within organizations. And what we've seen is that the ideas and benefits really start being unlocked when you're actually toying with the technology every day, and then the connections start to form.
Beyond some of the well-known, well-branded names like GPT, what are some of the lesser known, but in your view, impactful technologies that users and businesses should be aware of?
Sure. So it's not really in the market yet, but there's a coming wave of AI applied to robotics. We're seeing a little bit of it with self-driving cars, but and I don't mean this to be facetious or funny, but it's a kind of good analogy. I don't think we're that far from those Jetsons notions of personal robots that kind of assist you with your daily life. There's already a couple companies bringing very early versions of humanoid robots to market, some at like an $80,000 price point, and that's only going to go down. So I think that what we're living in this current wave of AI as a digital technology that's impacting our digital lives. But I think that will shift into the physical world with robotics. Another thing I think that I would be aware of as an organization or a government is the advancements in voice cloning and deep fakes are going to provide real challenges to existing authentication methods for proving that someone is indeed your customer calling your call center, for example.
I know this is going to be an issue that we'll cover with Llewellyn King when we have our panel discussion, but how do you protect against deep fakes and some of the potential concerns that you just mentioned?
There's a few strategies here. One of the ones that we're seeing initially is, and I think there will be increasing importance placed upon biometric authentication. I don't know if you've seen WorldCoin. It's this kind of crypto project from the founder of OpenAI, but they sometimes talk about it as quote unquote proof of human. They're scanning your irises as an authentication method. I think things like that will be increasingly important in a world in which it's trivial to clone someone's voice or even create a video that looks like someone else.
And how is AI revolutionizing sort of the traditional landscape of market research and customer satisfaction data?
The low-hanging fruit here, which we're seeing a lot of, is the ability and ease with which you can synthesize insights over vast amounts of unstructured data. So there's a lot of initial opportunity in optimizing call centers, both in terms of their interactions with consumers and then also mining that information for useful insights. That the complexity of doing those sorts of things is drastically reduced with this kind of wave of language models. Then there's kind of some next steps there. There's a researcher at Harvard Business School, Ayelet Israeli, doing some interesting work on creating synthetic panelists or synthetic focus group participants in order to do on-demand research using AI. So I think a lot of the barriers there are coming down. Another important, on the flip side, another important trend here is that an increasing amount of the content that you see online will not be made by humans. And that's both posts on social media, websites, um, and so a lot of existing approaches to data mining, social listening, and even SEO, I think are going to break, and they are going to demand uh, new solutions.
In addition to some of the challenges that you mentioned a moment ago, what are some of the ethical considerations that you're encountering?
So I think that data privacy will be increasingly important. I think that there will there should be, whether or not it happens, some increasing consumer sensitivity to how their data is used when they interact with AI systems. Different companies have different policies. Some companies take your information and use it as training. So actually, Zoom, which we are on right now, recently changed their terms of service. So everyone on this call has consented by continuing to use Zoom for Zoom to mine the video and voice audio data from these calls to train their AI systems. I think that change went unnoticed by a lot of people, and maybe most people don't care, and maybe it ultimately doesn't matter. But this is a new dimension or reason why privacy matters, especially in the era of deep fakes and audio cloning, when you only need a little bit of data to create a believable synthetic version of a person.
You know, in the context of smart cities, privacy is one of the greatest challenges that we've seen,
Mhm.
not just in the U.S. but around the world. It's become very, very controversial and a matter of great concern to different communities. Some address it in different ways. If you think of the Toronto Waterside project, the privacy issues really stopped Google's Sidewalk Labs in their tracks. What are you seeing in terms of, in a smart cities context, in terms of communities developing a process to protect, or at least to develop a policy around privacy?
I don't spend I don't know if I've noticed anything particularly emergent from communities themselves. One thing along these lines, though, that I do think will be increasingly interesting. So a lot of what happened in crypto uh, was fluff and will properly be forgotten. But part of the crypto bull run that we passed through was the emergence of this technology called zero knowledge proofs. And basically, what zero knowledge proofs allow you to do is to authenticate that you possess some credential or that you are some person without revealing your identity documents. So to take a slightly cartoonish or slightly nonsensical example, let's say that I could show up at a bar, the uh, the bouncer could verify that I am of age without me ever showing my actual identification documents. So the power of zero knowledge proofs is the ability to cryptographically verify that you are somebody or you possess some credential or identification, and kind of validate that to a third party without that third party ever knowing any of your actual particular details. I think that zero knowledge proofs are one of the many technologies which will become increasingly important.
How about AI developing market interest in novel products or services. What are you seeing in that realm?
Developing, kind of uncovering interest, or the creation of new kind of AI-enabled product categories?
The latter, categories and strategies for new businesses, developing new product lines.
Sure. I think that there is an opportunity to drastically simplify user interfaces. The kind of general umbrella under which you could place language models is the field of natural language processing, which just, you could describe it as interfaces built around conversational interfaces, so that you don't need, I can use some software or interact with some service without learning some UI or where some menu stores some particular piece of information that I need. I think that, and this is not my unique insight at all, this is kind of commonly accepted in the AI space, that a lot of interfaces will move from graphical to conversational. An example of that, I would be shocked if, I mean, Siri right now, Apple's assistant, is not terribly useful. They have an internal AI team that undoubtedly will upgrade that in the next year or two. And as one example of this, I think an increasing amount of our interactions with our smartphones will not require us to actually look at them, but have a kind of conversationally ask for things like, what are my 3 most urgent emails? Okay, give me the contact. This person emailed you about this thing. Hey Siri, give me the context for that email and help me draft a reply. So I think a lot of interfaces will become conversational first.
That's a adaptation that I would welcome. To sort
Yeah, I think it
through.
will be great for a lot of consumers. It's annoying to learn the interfaces for the myriad services that we use every day.
Christian, as we close out to save time for the rest of our panelists, what are 2 or 3 things that you're thinking that are of most interest to you in terms of specifics with companies you're dealing with, or new trends that you're beginning to see develop?
Sure. Again, I'm really interested in the coming wave of robotics, kind of AI applied to the world of robotics and spatial computing. I think there easy examples are, there's related to robotics, there's a lot of interesting last mile delivery services that are going to be coming to market in the coming months and years, using drones and other novel delivery devices to make life more convenient. We're already seeing self-driving cars have been talked about for a very long time, but they are actually in the market in a lot of San Francisco and the Bay Area right now. And I think that they're going to kind of expand, and it will be a great benefit to most consumers. Self-driving cars are actually here now. And yeah, I mean, I think those are, I'm particularly interested in how we move this kind of AI wave from a purely digital phenomenon to actually impacting and benefiting our lives in the physical world.
You know, we have recently done a roundtable on the subject of autonomous vehicles, and I think your prediction and insight is exactly right. And we look forward to coming back and developing this theme in future roundtables. But I think it'll be one of many really transformative developments that we're going to see. But Christian, thank you so much for joining us today. You've given us a great foundation to begin our discussion. And I'm going to start with Llewellyn King. Llewellyn is a very dear personal friend, has been for more than 30 years. He's really one of the leading energy journalists in the United States and beyond, but also much more than that. He's the executive producer and host of the widely acclaimed TV show, The White House Chronicles. He is also a syndicated columnist for Inside Sources Syndicate. He's a contributor to Forbes, and in his free time, he's also a central commentator for Sirius XM Radio. Llewellyn, you are probably more than anyone else the person that has focused my attention on AI and possibilities and applications. Why has this issue grabbed you by the lapels? You've been way ahead of the herd in terms of reporting on it.
Well, thank you very much. It's grabbed me by the lapels, as you say, because it's seminal. It is one of those events, one of those arrivals, one of those inventions, if you will, that is seminal. That means from now on, nothing will be the same as it was. And it's also going to affect every aspect of how we live. Human life is going to be profoundly changed in ways we're only beginning to imagine. Some of them we can see. We can see, for example, that'll be very obvious in anything to do with the public, any institution dealing with the public, including cities. We can see that it will also subtract a lot of low-paying jobs and may substitute them with jobs, but we don't know that yet. The big significant thing that I think is worth watching is that automation created jobs, automation was good for people, automation created products that did not exist. The Industrial Revolution overall was a huge benefit to mankind. But AI is arriving not in a time of an industrial economy, but in a time of a service economy. And it subtracts service jobs. So that's well worth watching in itself, but it is only part of the huge and complex impact that AI is going to have on us as individuals, on our nations, on our interpersonal relationships, and of course, on how cities operate. Mostly in anything like a city or its services, it's a huge benefit. Cities are going to be much more efficient and much cheaper to operate with AI.
Llewellyn, we'll come back to the question of subtraction of jobs as we go along with our panel. But what when you look at different applications that you're hearing about for smart cities and improvements of cities, are there any particular examples that you find especially exciting?
I don't know what has been applied. I don't think there's been a lot of application in cities. I think there's been a lot of analysis or expectation of applications. But for example, and this is not a state matter in the US, but there are offices, Department of Motor Vehicles. It's going to be a lot cleaner, neater, easier operation because it will have removed the human dimension, and of course it will be based entirely on facts that the AI system has gleaned about the applicant and about the driving history, everything to do with why you get or don't get or have a driver's permit renewed. Likewise, libraries and the hardware side of it, it's going to manage sewage systems, for example, in a way that we cannot do now. It's going to know about flows and pressures in great detail and be able to do deductive thinking about what should be done to fix a problem. We have a lot of sensors now, we have a lot of data, but it's not being synthesized into a course of action. AI will frequently synthesize data into a proposed course of action, which is a massive step forward.
You know, we have one of the greatest challenges that we've encountered with respect to smart cities. It's just the difficulty in developing a systems approach, as you've just mentioned, with respect to the possibilities that AI now brings to us. Are you able to discuss that further, Llewellyn? Looks like you might have frozen on the screen, Llewellyn. So what I'm going to do is, if you can hear me, I'm going to suggest that you log off and then come back in. There we go. And I'm going to move to our next panelist, Dr. Kelly Rose. Kelly is a geodata scientist. She has many years of experience with the DOE National Energy Technology Laboratory, and specifically with the lab's AI and MI Institute, where she is the executive director. And her lab has recently been winning, and Kelly have been winning numerous awards and recognition. Kelly, first of all, what are some examples of things that your lab is doing that particularly is exciting to you, or brings to mind issues that you'd like to mention in our roundtable today?
Well, thank you all for the opportunity to join you. As a researcher in the public service domain here at DOE, I mean, our role is to look at things that the commercial sector is not yet implementing. So we're always looking at the problems and challenges that are coming up that society will benefit from if there is science-based approaches, explainable, trustworthy, and cross-cutting beneficial purpose to the innovations that we're working on. So we also tend in DOE to work at scales that differ from many other institutions and entities, not explicitly. The technology sector has definitely scaled up their computational capabilities, but DOE still operates some of the world's largest dedicated advanced computing systems, including the largest high-performance computing, exascale computing system in the world, out of one of our sister labs to NETL. We also maintain the world's largest scientific and engineering workforce, and we are here for public benefit, to combine that expertise and those advanced capabilities to address a whole range of problems that are complicated, often multidimensional. So you look at the challenges of today that are facing not only cities, but smaller communities as well. The changing weather patterns that impact and cause wildfires in places we've never seen before, or flooding events, stress on our energy infrastructure due to extreme weather events and aging infrastructure. These are complicated. The shift in the energy sector overall, from the conventional fossil fuel dependence of the past to a much more diversified portfolio of increasingly clean energy options of the future. So DOE is leveraging those advanced computing in combination with the science expertise of our personnel, like myself and my team, and we tackle these various problems. They're complicated. They are more akin to what Christian was talking about with self-driving vehicles. You can imagine all the complexities, all the thoughts that go on in your mind when you're driving, that a car that is going to automate that through AI and other methods and technologies, that it needs to do seamlessly and almost perfectly. There's very little tolerance for technology solutions to fail. The aircraft industry is a great example. We have a very high expectation that planes are going to stay in the air. And so when it comes to understanding weather events and energy transition and how to enable the cities of the future and improve the energy infrastructure of yesterday to meet the needs of tomorrow, We need new solutions. And they are not single AI solutions or data-driven solutions. They are often multivariate, multidisciplinary, modeling solutions. And that takes innovation, it takes time, it takes testing to prove it up to a point where it goes out of that basic science into an applied science, higher TRL domain. And when something is proven out, DOE has a really nice series of programs and efforts that can allow it to matriculate into the commercial sector, or we're often partnering with commercial entities to help with that maturation. So the opportunity for AI innovation to accelerate and inform and responsibly evolve and support society's needs, I think is really great. But obviously it has to be done in a way that is trustworthy and that we understand what the risks are. Every new technology innovation that's come along through humanity, the invention of the wheel, the invention of the cotton gin, I mean, everything has had a controversial element, a positive and a negative. And it is part of our mission as well within the government service to make sure that we are evolving and demonstrating the veracity of these innovations to meet those future complex societal problems. The future is always crescendoing up on us, but I think the opportunity for AI to help us meet some of these very complicated challenges is real, and we have some great examples of it. We've been tackling in the offshore sector since the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, a combination of massive data aggregation with AI models to understand those offshore systems, from subsurface to the engineered components to the oceanographic and climatological systems, to improve modeling and improve forecasting and earn the trust of the commercial sector, regulators, and others with these types of models and tools, so that we can make predictions and hopefully prevent future failures of that nature, but also be prepared and identify areas that may be at risk in the future as well. Help commercial sector and regulators with maintenance and monitoring. We've been recently adapting many of those types of models and tools to address other applications. Climate forecasting for hurricane strength, met-ocean patterns are changing, so the oceanographic currents are changing their patterns. That has implications for shipping and transport, immigrants that are coming on the water, plastic pollution in the ocean. The opportunity for these advanced data-driven and AI models to address all sorts of interesting problems is significant. And we are working on those things now. I have colleagues at several other national labs who've been working on similar types of challenges for wildfire forecasting in collaboration with university partners and others. So there's a lot that we still need to answer, validate, and prove following the scientific method. All of these are hypothesis driven. We believe we can address the following need by doing X, and then we have to prove it. But that is the path that we are on, and integration of AI technologies and AI tools and models and statistics and data are helping us accelerate, validate, and deploy these types of capabilities to meet societal and national needs.
It's extremely helpful to have the national labs looking at this in the way your lab is, as an honest broker, and also highly informed on the analytics, because we're going to be receiving so much information that it's going to be hard for our social infrastructure to keep up with it.
Yes.
One thing you mentioned that is probably important to establish, and that is, you pointed out in an earlier discussion that we use these sweeping generalizations about AI, but not all AI is the same. Do you want to elaborate on that a tiny bit?
Absolutely. I'd like to explain to folks, like, AI is a catch-all. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, they're these big toolboxes, basically, from math and statistics and computing science. And one of the most important things for anyone who wants to get involved in artificial intelligence, machine learning based activities, whatever it may be, is to make sure that you pick the right tool for the job. Or tools. Sometimes you need more than one AI tool, machine learning tool, to address the problem that you're dealing with. So if you're dealing with classification related problems, you might need a supervised machine learning method or tool. If you are dealing with a lot of data and you're looking to reduce dimensions and cluster, look for patterns, there are a lot of unsupervised machine learning methods. Christian already talked a little bit about generative AI, which is related to, a broader category of deep learning, which is predictive AI, and involves and includes natural language processing, neural networks, and a whole suite of other tools that exist. It can feel daunting. I remember, I'm a geologist by degree and training. But for 15 plus years now, my work has involved data computing in coordination with the geologic background that I bring to the table. And my team is very diverse on purpose. Data science, AI, ML, it often takes a team. It takes a team to learn from each other and to bring those different knowledge expertise to address the problem that you're trying to resolve. So picking the right tool and just chipping away a little bit at a time. You can't take on the entire AI ML suite of capabilities all at once, or it would be rare. There are some folks that probably could do it. But just giving yourself the grace to say, I'm curious about how I could answer this question. I wonder what AI tool would fit. And either looking online, there's tons of trainings and YouTube videos. You can, there's short courses available through universities, that often gratis, for free, for entry level. And the more you just chip away at building up a foundational knowledge, the less daunting it feels. And the more you can start to hone in on what path makes sense. And the better you'll be able to communicate with folks that may be expert in that domain. You may not need to be the full expert. You may just need to know enough of the language to be able to communicate with a peer or a contractor or a colleague to be able to accomplish the mission that you're on, that you're tackling. But I think the biggest thing to remember is that these are tools, and you must pick the right tool or set of tools to address the problem that you're trying to resolve.
Great overview, Kelly. We're going to come back to you and Llewellyn in a moment, but let me introduce our third panelist, Siva Sankara Narayanan. And Siva is the principal technical leader at EPRI, which is the Electric Power Research Institute, and he currently leads Series AI Grand Challenge on grid interaction and smart communities. And Siva, Kelly has really laid out some broad, really given us a great foundation. What are, is there a good working definition that you have developed on AI in the context of smart cities and smart buildings?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everybody for this opportunity. Honored to be part of this panel. Yeah, so as there's been, I think Christian mentioned this as well, that there's this whole, and Dr. Rose as well, that there's this whole body of research, and AI kind of is an umbrella term. It's being used for everything. So one of the natural questions that come up, at least in the building space, and the smart buildings, the smart community space, is to try to set up a working definition. And this is something that I've personally struggled with, because I don't know whether I have to pay attention to something because it's important, it's got the right meat to the bones, or if it's just if it's all just fluff. So The working definition that at least we in my area of research tend to work with are to understand if the availability of heterogeneous data sets. So this is data that comes from the systems. It could be Internet of Things devices, monitors. Air quality, circuit level monitoring, load monitors, operating data from your smart devices. So there has to be a fairly large, densely available data set of this sort of heterogeneous data, and then on top of it, there has to be a definition of how there is a learning objective that is associated with understanding something that uses this data, whether it is learning behavioral characteristics of the system, of the built environment, of the community, or it is learning the how the system could be used in the context of serving a larger purpose, say a grid purpose or a community purpose. For example, how can we learn from this data to establish the resiliency needs of this community? So there is an abundance of heterogeneous data, a need for a learning objective, and then a third and probably the more optional piece of it, but one that we think is vital, is an optimization element to it, meaning that something there has to be veritable trade-offs here. If you don't have this sort of set of trade-offs built in naturally in the system, there is no need for an artificial intelligence. You could set up rules-based systems and it'll work really well. So if you know something is going to happen periodically every single day, you're actually much better off just setting up a rule for it. And there are umpteen devices that can do it for you. You don't need an artificial intelligence mechanism for it. So, but when you have these trade-offs, and if these trade-offs are multidimensional and complex, then there is a real need to have this trade-off happen and be done in a way that is optimal across a set of stakeholders that are involved. The classic case in point is where you have smart communities or connected communities serving both the community needs in terms of, say, it's a low-income community. You want to reduce the total energy bills in the community, but at the same time, you want to make sure that the investment that is made in that community serves a larger purpose for improving the overall efficiency of the electrical system. Then you have this sort of trade-off between trying to increase the efficiency for the system while keeping the residents safe and secure and comfortable. So this sort of trade-off is necessary, and if that is in play, then yes, there is a role for something like an artificial intelligence-based system to come and play here. So the three characteristics that I look for are abundance of heterogeneous data, learning objectives, and optimization objective to the overall system performance.
Thank you, Siva. And what are some of the most exciting applications for smart cities and communities and buildings that EPRI is working on at the present time?
Yeah, so that's and applications are, there are lots of applications. And again, much like the work that Dr. Rose is doing, EPRI is a research organization. We work in collaboration with industry. We work through grants by the government, energy commissions. The Department of Energy itself has several grants available, and EPRI has been awarded some of these grants in the space to work on these things. Most of our applications where we find that there is a good application of data-driven or AI-based systems is looking at how we can improve aspects of, say, the community resiliency. Are we able to, as we transition from a fossil fuel-driven economy to a cleaner economy where there is more dependence on renewables and there's more availability and cleaner grid, are we able to provide the level of resiliency in this community to events, to climate change, to weather events to, are we able to support the needs of the vulnerable population in this community? So these sorts of applications become important, and there is a role for AI to play in these sorts of applications. And it can go from something as important and as expansive as that to something very, very small and niche, like understanding if your home's HVAC system needs proactive maintenance or not, based on the data that's being collected, operational data that's being collected from it, right? So there is a whole plethora of applications that we've been looking at and trying to understand. I think the more important question, and because of the way in which EPRI is structured, is that we are largely funded by work by our utility members. And so we try to understand what the utility impact is of many of these emerging technologies and emerging approaches. And so we always try to understand how there is a balance between sort of the community needs and the community applications versus the applications that are more relevant for the distribution system or for the grid or for the transmission system and so on.
Well, you and Kelly have touched on some of the key issues that keep utility executives up at night. Wildfires, we've seen that just in the West Coast, but now the horrific fire in Maui.
Right.
We see turbulent weather and those impacts. Can you give us a few more examples regarding possible approaches for climate change and the clean energy transition?
So EPRI I'd say about 5 or 6 years ago, and may have been before as well, but for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been involved in this. So we've been developing an incubation program for startups that are on a wide spectrum of topics, all the way from generation to utilization of electricity and energy in general. And some of the key areas that have emerged in the startup space are focused on applications of AI for climate change, for example. So we have come across several startups. A couple of them come to mind that I was involved, not necessarily involved with, but I've had a chance to observe them. Is one of them is the system called, I think it's called Dryad Networks, and they have these monitors for monitoring smoked. It's a system of IoT devices that works as a mesh network and can provide an early warning system for wildfire detection. And they're doing some really great work in this space. And I've been working with several transmission utilities, try to understand especially ones where there is dense vegetation close to transmission facilities that are potentially source for wildfires. But in general, there's been other applications that have also been emerging in this space. There's a organization called Climate Change AI that is doing some great work in this space in terms of trying to understand the modeling aspects to it. EPRI ourselves have launched an initiative called Climate Ready that is focused on trying to understand the adaptation and resilience of the overall grid and trying to address climate models and trying to understand how this can work. So there's a whole bunch of modeling efforts type of activity that's happening to try to address and come up with strategies for how AI and data in general can help fight climate change.
Thank you, Siva. I should mention that if any members of the audience have questions, please feel free to put them into the Q&A feature on this platform. But please don't go to the chat room, or you will make me dizzy trying to monitor all of the above. And we'll come back to you as well. I wanted to talk to you in a minute a little bit about some of your thoughts on social infrastructure, keeping up with technology and allocation of benefits. But let me introduce my good friend and partner, Todd Daubert. He is our cleanup hitter on the panel today. He is the chair of our law firm's communications practice and also our technology practice. And he specifically leads teams on privacy and cybersecurity, some of the issues that have already come up in our conversation. Todd, what are some of the, in your view, what are a few of the biggest misconceptions that you are coming across with respect to AI?
I think it's a great question. And before I start any of my comments, I want to say that this is such a broad topic that you can always come up with exceptions. So I'm generally going to be talking generally about this. But as an engineer, I really think that we've done ourselves a disservice by using the term AI to begin with, because I think it interferes with us thinking about this technology in the most constructive way. And what I mean is that the term AI is so broad that I think it's helpful for most of the things that we call AI today to think of it instead in terms of machine learning, because it's easier for us to think about machine learning as a tool than it is to think about intelligence, which we tend to fetishize, and we tend to think about as a creature, as a living thing that can go off and do its own things. And I think that for the most part, if we talk about things in terms of machine learning, it's helpful for us to think about it in terms of the way that Christian has mentioned and Dr. Rose and Siva about these are tools, picking the right tool for the job, picking, making sure that you are overseeing the use of the tool in a proper way. So I think that, first of all, not thinking about this in terms of some creature with sentient intelligence that's going to take over and cause these risks. That's number one. Number two, machine learning has been around for a long time. And I think that what you're seeing now is, in order for machine learning to have real impacts on society, it's really not just machine learning on its own. It's machine learning plus a data set, plus an action to do something with, what you've learned from the tools. And so I think when you think about smart cities, we're getting to a place now where machine learning and artificial intelligence can make a real difference because we have data. We have much more sensors. We have many more ways to collect information. And the more information you have, the more likely you can have a breakthrough about how we maybe should be doing something differently than we have in the past. And I'll give you an example. Let's take energy consumption in your house. If your only sensor is whether the power is on or off, you're not going to be able to reach very many good conclusions. You can have that data about every house across your city, but it's harder to get machine learning to come up with real insights. But the more sensors you have, where you have what rooms are people in, when are they coming, what are they doing in those rooms, these things that could get really creepy, the technologies could actually then put together insights that we wouldn't have thought of before, that we wouldn't have had the people power to process and to collect and to put together like that. So I think that, that sort of also gets into one of the privacy concerns. There's like two concerns here. One is, for this to really work, we need a lot of data. Are we willing to give all this data to whomever is using the machine learning tools to process? And the other is, where are we, how are we using the data, and with whom are we sharing it? But the point is, I think the biggest misconception is that this will sort out all the problems on its own and not viewing it as a tool. Very good tools, very helpful, beneficial tools. But so that's one. Another misconception, I think, is that people fail to understand how the technology works, so they tend to give too much faith to it. So imagine if you didn't understand how email worked, and you put your social security number and your bank account number and your passwords into an email and shot it out to your neighborhood, to all of your neighbors, right? It's not the email's fault. It's your fault because you didn't take the time to understand what this technology was doing. And I think that one of the dangers you have right now is there's so much enthusiasm about some of the machine learning with a lack of understanding of what some of these tools are doing and, you know, appropriate uses, that it makes it difficult for companies, for governments to take the appropriate sort of risk mitigation techniques, like the great framework that NIST just put out of how you identify potential risks that would come from use of a tool. So in short, I'm a huge fan of machine learning, and I think that it has the possibility to change the world. I think that in order for it to do that, we have to view it like every other tool. We have to get beyond the hype. We have to understand how it works. We need to understand the data that we're using for that particular tool and the objective that we have for using it. And then finally, I would say, you know, you hear a lot of people talking about loss of jobs, like the potential for massive loss of jobs. I personally don't think that's likely. I think it will have a massive transformative impact on labor. And I think that people definitely need to think about how it's going to impact labor. But I view it really as, when it's used the best way, it's like 1,000 people who could instantly communicate with each other, going through these massive data sets and putting together connections that we just didn't have time. And the point is, we don't have those people working today. So for most applications of machine learning, I don't think that we're actually taking away jobs from people, because I don't think that people are actually able to do the jobs today. We don't have enough people to go through all the data, you know, even autonomous cars, even all the data that you get just from a single car. You'd have to have a mini army of humans sorting through all that data instantaneously and communicating with each other instantaneously to be able to do the most basic things. So I think that machine learning will actually, if we use it correctly and we manage the risk correctly, will actually free up labor to have a higher function job, to have a better job, and increase the quality of life for us all. So I'm an enthusiast once we get past the hype. And I think there's a lot of hype right now. So that's the biggest misconceptions, I would think.
Thank you, Todd. We're going to come back to Llewellyn now and go through the sequence of our panel, and maybe put some more emphasis on social infrastructure and protections. One of the themes of our think tank is that rather than simply being a tech play, smart cities is really about modernization of all infrastructure. So it includes technology and digital infrastructure and physical infrastructure, but very importantly, it also includes social infrastructure. And one of our greatest concerns is that the technology is moving so fast that the social infrastructure is not catching up to it. Llewellyn, feel free to comment on that, but you also had raised a point with me earlier that I was particularly interested in, you might start with, and that is, what steps can we take to authenticate communications when AI creates deep fake images and voices?
Well, this is a very, very important subject, and it's here and now. Very soon we're dealing with this. As a journalist, I know that we're going to have huge difficulty in verifying anything that is sent to us, whether it looks like a press release, a leaked document, an honest release of a letter. Lots of letters are released and become the basis of news stories. We have no way of verifying that. None. Already it is a problem. Every year I go to the Association of European Journalists meeting, and recently they've attacked me or come to me and said, what do we do? These are people primarily dealing with artificial intelligence coming out of Russia, or at least computer science deception coming out of Russia. We don't know, and sometimes it's physical deception. Like one man said, I covered a riot, there were skinheads. Later, after I'd written it up, I found out they weren't skinheads, they were Russian agents. So verification gets more difficult. It gets to be a huge challenge for journalists and, in my view, for lawyers. If you want absolutely to be certain that a document is real, type it on an old-fashioned typewriter and send it in old-fashioned mail. That way you will know that it is real, but that's not a solution. But I think this is a large problem. Also, the employment. Already, all major news organizations are using artificial intelligence, including the New York Times and the Associated Press. In India, they have anchormen, news readers, who are not real. They're artificially generated, but they ask questions of real-life reporters. Well, that's very scary, because after a while they may be asking questions of artificially generated reporters, and the viewer will not be able to verify whether that is so or not. It's very troublesome. On the social impact, this is enormous. And I've heard today things that people are very enthusiastic about this, and we're not going to stop it. I'm not unenthusiastic. I think by and large it'll be good, but the immediate social disruption could be enormous. I don't believe that we really thought it through, or that the right people are thinking about it, because those developing AI are very excited. They should be excited. It's an exciting technology. But Christian said, in San Francisco, they're very close to having AI running vehicles, which means that very soon the taxis will be AI. Then the Uber cars and the Lyft cars will be AI. Those are a lot of jobs, and San Francisco doesn't need more people looking for work in the street at the low end. And it is low-end workers who will be displaced. People who work in call centers, people who do remarkably menial things. The immediate improvement, but we already see it in work, is for the trades, for artisans, for people who, once AI has discovered the infrastructure problem that Kelly mentioned, will go in and repair it. We'll still need people who can swing hammers and turn screws until the point arrives where an autonomous creature can do that. Hotels will be affected. You will check in, probably speak to a screen or maybe a simulated person, but you won't have as many people in service, and you'll have a much better response when you call your bank, and now you're put on hold and all this nonsense, so no human being want to speak to you. You will then have AI which will want to speak to you, in many cases can resolve the problem, but the impact on low-end workers is going to be huge and devastating, and in my view, soon.
Thank you, Llewellyn. And we will come back to you with one more question in a moment on AI, but let's get Kelly back involved. Kelly, in a prior discussion, you mentioned something that intrigued me, and that is that Chat GPT 2.0 has been described as having a, quote, squirrel-like brain, and that when compared to the current 4.0 version. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and how you evaluate that?
Well, I don't personally evaluate that, but there's other researchers out there that have been trying to one of the other panelists' points earlier, a lot of these AI tools are not, the majority, the vast majority are not sentient or unsupervised. The majority require humans in the loop. And so a lot of the things that we hear about in, even in the movies and in the media and in congressional testimony, and not just here, but in other countries, is the fear of what if this goes sentient? And that's been part of the human narrative in science fiction for a very long time, and a lot of things that humans have written about in science fiction have come to pass. But it's not like it's going to happen overnight. And I think what's important to note for the researchers that are studying and trying to equate the cognitive power of tools like ChatGPT, Gen AI, is it gives us a way to relate to those tools. If ChatGPT 2.0 has been evaluated to have a brain size of a squirrel, well, I don't think most of us would trust a squirrel to answer most of the questions that we would pose to it. It leaped ahead on 4.0 with the evaluation from this one specific group that are very reputable and you know, they're world-class researchers, but it's one group that's doing this evaluation. That's important. Just like anything else in society, you want to know, is it a trustworthy group that's doing this type of analysis and evaluation? And more importantly, having more than one resource, trusted resource, verified resource that has that same type of opinion and evaluation is important to build consensus, to say, yep, this is what we believe. So this group is doing that work. Other groups are starting to do it too. But what it's communicating is that these tools are useful, but they're still tools, and they still require us as the users to be responsible, to ask, does this result make sense? I have a member of my team that took even the ChatGPT 4.0 tool earlier this year. We did a similar fireside chat with just internal with our group to help our community learn about these tools, to demystify them a little bit. And I was in awe of him because he showed up, and when he introduced himself to the community, to the folks that had logged in, he said, I had ChatGPT write my bio. We're going to play truth and fiction. And he read the bio that ChatGPT had written based on the resources it could find out about him online in the open source and that he had fed to it. And it was a beautifully written bio. But he would interject, this is true, this is not true, this is true, this is not true. And it helped underscore the importance of these are tools, they can be used very effectively, but they still come with the need for validation, verification, and someone to put eyes on it. They have great power. One of the things that I think is very exciting about AI today, you know, Todd put out the point very, very excellently that AI tools have been around for decades and decades. What's different today is the scale at which we can use them. He also, you know, illustrated that it would take hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of people working on certain problems to be able to do the scale of analyses that some of these AI models and tools are able to do. But it doesn't mean that we abdicate our responsibility to verify them and make sure they're trustworthy. You heard from Siva, EPRI is also working on, you know, some of the same types of models and tools that the DOE national labs or universities or even the commercial sector are working on. And you might go, well, why are they working on the same thing? It's actually really important. When you look at the weather forecast, it's not usually based on one weather predictive model. They run multiple simulations using the same model or using different models, and they look for the convergence to build up that forecast of 70% chance of rain. This is how much we trust it. Pretty good chance of rain. I'm going to carry an umbrella if it's 70%. AI models are the same. They come with error. And having more than one model asking questions about the same problem in certain situations for certain applications is actually an important method. And having the humans being able to take the results, the experts relative to whatever problem it is you're tackling. It could be the you know, the smart cities. Is this power consumption making sense that the model is analyzing? Is there something anomalous in that? And a power systems operator who's very expert with that could say, this isn't making sense. We need to look at this. The model's doing something funky, or the system's doing something funky. Let's figure it out. Same goes with weather forecast, wildfire forecasting, other hazards. It comes back to that human in the loop, still having experts at all different scales for all different systems that can verify the trustworthiness of something. And over time, it earns our trust. But right now, Gen AI and ChatGPT, it's a great tool, but it's not infallible. Therefore, we need to teach people the tools and tricks to be smart, savvy AI users and consumers. They don't have to be experts, but we have to teach them to ask, does this make sense? Have I seen it validated somewhere else that I trust from a verified source? Are there experts? Is there convergence? There's so many important elements to this. So the size of the cognitive power of the tool is just a way of communicating the measure of that tool's effectiveness. And the group that's studying that ChatGPT 2.0 to 4.0, it's leaped forward, but it's still got a long ways to go. And it's going to take humans to continue to help it train and learn and grow, just like we teach our children in society and ourselves to continue to grow and evolve with time. So there's great potential, but you still have to ask, does it make sense?
Thank you, Kelly. Some great points. Siva, on the subject of social infrastructure, in our prior conversation, you raised some points that are near and dear to my heart. And that is, you introduced the concept of how, as AI makes a number of improvements with smart cities and communities, how do we go about ensuring equitable sharing of benefits?
Right.
Could you really delve into that, please?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the things that at EPRI that we take a very sharp focus on is trying to ensure that the energy transition is an equitable transition. We don't have pockets of the economy that have been left out. And one of the aspects that I think that, in fact, that I've, when your children have career day at school and they bring their parents to come and talk about it. One of my previous jobs, I was working. I could not explain my job and so I was one of those parents that would never show up at these events. But ever since I've joined EPRI, which was about 7 years ago, I've been very happily going to these because I can call myself a climate change fighter, and that gives me a lot of street cred. But more importantly, I try to kind of incorporate it into my day-to-day as well. And one of the aspects is trying to understand how this can be done equitably. And I think for me, one of the interesting aspects is that with the emergence of AI and with the emergence of this, the transformation that's happening, the market transformation that's happening, there is a fundamental improvement in the infrastructure in the community. A classic case in point is we work with Tennessee Valley Authority, one of our utility partners, who have embarked on their own Connected Communities initiative. But they have a very fundamental definition of a Connected Communities initiative. The number one thing that they do in their Connected Communities initiative is to connect the community, is to ensure there is ubiquitous broadband access in that community. Which is amazing, because if you think about it, they have several communities that are rural, several communities that are not necessarily cities and so on that are advanced in their infrastructure. So having the fundamental infrastructure in place helps that community a lot, and that's almost 70% improvement to that community if you think about it, right? So there is a fundamental improvement in the infrastructure in the community that comes about as a result of this. But we also see additional things. New York City Housing Authority, another great organization that we work with for several of our demonstration projects on emerging technologies, has created an academy for training their residents with green and clean tech jobs. So these are community residents these are low income. This is low income housing. These are residents that are disadvantaged communities. And yet they have developed a mechanism by which they can train their own residents in aspects of this emerging green economy, which is fantastic. So there is fundamental infrastructure development that's happening, but also there is a great deal of additional work that's happening, not just within EPRI and the research organizations, but across other partnering organizations that we work with, universities especially. There's been, one of the joys that I've had as a lead of EPRI's Grid Interactive Smart Communities initiative is to be able to take large volumes and swathes of data that we have collected from several of our work and distribute it in a way that makes it, we anonymize it, we make sure that there is no personally identifiable information in it, make sure that privacy requirements are satisfied, but make these data sets available to industry partners and to actually academic partners, because there's a lot of work in academia that's happening that's focused on trying to develop algorithms and approaches to improving the solving specific problems, but they don't have access to real world data. So we've been able to develop this infrastructure to share this data with them and help them and sort of develop this collaborative approach. And all of this are also specifically tuned at being able to solve problems that are critical to communities of need, right? So this is so at least from my small vantage point, I've seen how AI can be a true catalyst to improving these community infrastructure, improving jobs in these communities in the new economy, as well as being able to democratize the availability of really high-powered tools to a wide variety of audience. So yeah, I'm an optimist when it comes to AI, application of AI in this space.
This is an issue that's a really keen interest to our think tank, Siva. So we will be communicating with you on an ongoing basis. We'd love to
Absolutely
learn as you receive more information on this and develop
Certainly.
your work. Todd, we have about 10 minutes left, roughly. I'm hoping to ask you a question and Llewellyn a wrap-up question, and then have Christine close us out. What are some common risks and risk mitigation techniques that you are examining in your legal capacity with respect to AI, machine learning, whatever descriptor we use?
It's a great question, and I think a lot of it has to do with risk. With two things. One is not really understanding the tool that you want to use and not being able to vet that the tool is appropriate or that the people are doing with your data what they say they're doing. So for most tools, if you come in and you hire a subcontractor for your house and you say, I want you to paint this wall and I want you to use this color paint and this is how I want it done, you have the knowledge to look at the work when it's completed, or to at least get references from people who can tell you, yes, this person is a good painter, and you'll get the result you want. I think the biggest challenge that people have today is when you're considering a vendor with some sort of machine learning or AI, they can tell you, for example, that they're not going to train on your data, but you don't have a way to verify that. And that's a risk, because as we've all seen, sometimes vendors, whether intentionally or unintentionally, cannot live up to the promises that they've told you that they're going to take. So that's one issue that I think people really have to look at. Another one is thinking about how these tools could be used in a way that's unexpected. So a lot of clients are considering using machine learning and AI for coding, because you can go out and ask it to code something for you, and you'll get code that functions. But the issue is, if you're unable to vet that code correctly, you might be introducing problems associated with open source or security flaws into your software that could really be damaging. And I told one client who was considering this, I said, listen, if I were a bad actor, here's what I would do. I would figure out how to essentially do the old form of Google salting, where you'd go out and I'd write code to do something extraordinarily simple, and I'd work a flaw into it that I could exploit later. And then I'd put it out into the world and let it propagate for 5 years, so that whenever people go and use a tool to say, hey, write some code that will do X, I don't need everyone to pull my flaw. I just need some people to pull it. And then at the end of my time, I'd tell the same learning tools to go out and find everybody who used my my software flaw, and then I would exploit it. And so my point is, if you don't have a means for vetting someone, and you don't have any means for verifying the outcome, or you don't understand how the tool actually works, then today you probably shouldn't move forward with it. Doesn't mean it's a bad tool. It means it may not be right for you for your risk management.
Thank you, Todd. And the point you raise is a perfect transition to a question for Llewellyn. Llewellyn, several weeks ago, you sent me an article that really pointed out just how difficult it is to correct inaccurate information with AI, especially if it is introduced, to Todd's point, by a nefarious actor. Can you, in just a couple of minutes, close us out with that, and then we'll have Christine give a farewell address.
This goes back to the issue of provenance and veracity. We don't know how to ensure the source or how to verify its correctness. But I do have this feeling, I'm not a scientist, I'm a journalist, so I can only have feelings, I can't give you a scientific, that within the abilities of AI, we may develop within AI ways that AI can police itself, ways that it cannot do now. I would also point to the large and looming problem of intellectual property. Who owns what? How do you keep it back? And just the secrets. I've spent various amount of time covering classified things, and keeping secrets is very difficult, especially for governments, and we've seen it get much more difficult when with computers. When we get AI at work, there may be no, it's only partially a joke when I say we may have to go back to typewriters and paper. You can lock those up in a cabinet. You can't lock up anything in a cabinet that's on the web. So beware of it. I think the big challenges, we know the challenges. This is bigger than we anticipated ever in anything, and it's coming faster. The Industrial Revolution, Newcomen invented the steam engine, Watt perfected it with a condenser, etc., and we went towards where we had entirely industrial. We knew about shaft horsepower before that because we had water wheels and animal propelled, but the speed with which AI is now going is really breakneck, and we need to think about the downsides. This does not mean that anybody can stop it. The only way you can stop AI is to stop electricity. Turn it off. There's no AI, but that's not a feasible solution. So we need a lot more thought about how AI can police itself, how it can put in place protections, and what the social impact is going to be. And the social impact can be huge. For some reason, it came to my mind the Clarences in Britain during the term when the weaving got better, wool became very precious and needed, and people who lived on and farmed common land were driven off by the landlords and became homeless and hapless. And it was a truly terrible human situation. If we're not careful, we will have in the job market a kind of replication of the Clarences, because suddenly we will have a more lucrative, more efficient, more complete way of doing what people used to do. And we've got to be awfully sure we have other things for people to do.
Perfect closeout, Llewellyn. And Christine, I love this subject, and I love this incredible panel, including our fireside chat with Kristen, to really set the table for our discussion. So would you like to have the last words?
I would love that. And I would just say, wow, what a learning opportunity. What an incredible assembly of brilliant minds and thinking, Clint, that you all have put together today. And I'm just intrigued. You know, we're a policy organization that looks for innovative ways to address societal questions and problems. And the the myriad of issues that were raised today, as well as the opportunities in addressing climate. It's exciting. It's exciting and it's challenging. And I've learned so much from each of you. I just really appreciate the time together, and especially Clint and the Dentons team in pulling all of us together today. And Clint, your facilitation was brilliant. Every question that I had, you found a way to answer. So I really appreciate that. So just a sincere thank you.
This would be really a perfect topic for a Keystone
Yeah,
dialogue. And I think
absolutely.
here you have some of the perfect presenters, actually. And I can't wait to see Keystone tackle Siva's really compelling suggestions on how to share equitably some of the social benefits. So with that, really a huge ovation to you all on behalf of our audience, and thank you very much. You did a beautiful job.